Single mom texted her location to wrong number. Minutes later, Mafia boss arrived with his gang. Before we dive into the story, tell me where in the world you're watching from, and if this story steals your heart, please hit subscribe. The splintering wood of the apartment door vibrated against Emily's shoulder, the force of the impacts shaking dust from the jam. Each thud of Marco's fist was a hammer blow against her ribs, stealing the air from her lungs. She had her small, 4-year-old son, Leo, tucked behind the threadbare sofa, his tiny hands pressed over his ears, his eyes wide and brimming with a terror that mirrored her own. The latch on the door was cheap, the frame already cracked from his last visit, and Emily knew with a sickening certainty that it would not hold for more than another minute. Rain lashed against the thin glass of the window, a violent percussion that seemed to sync with the pounding of her heart and the man raging in the hallway. This was it. He was finally going to break in, and there was no one to stop him. In a blind panic, her fingers trembling so badly she could barely grip the phone, Emily tried to message her sister. She needed help. She needed anyone to know where she was. She fumbled to open her contacts, her vision blurred by tears of sheer desperation, and instead of clicking Sarah, her thumbs spasmed, hitting a number she did not recognize, a number saved months ago from a misdial, labeled only with a question mark. She did not realize her mistake. She only knew she had to send the message before the lock gave way. Her fingers flew, typing, "He is trying to break in. Help me. 1412 Harlow Street, Apt 3B. And with a final, desperate stab of her thumb, she hit the Share Live Location button and sent it into the void. The delivered receipt popped up just as a heavy crack echoed through the room. Marco roared, and the door jamb splintered, the lock bursting from the weak wood. The door flew open, slamming against the interior wall, and Marco stood there, drenched from the rain, his eyes bloodshot and fixed on her with a possessive fury. He was not a large man, but he was fueled by a wiry, unpredictable rage that had terrorized her for 2 years. "You thought you could ignore me, Emily?" he hissed, stepping inside, the smell of cheap whiskey and wet wool filling the small space. "You thought I would just let you go, let you keep my son." Emily instinctively moved, trying to place her body between him and the sofa where Leo was hiding, her hands raised in a useless gesture of defense. "Marco, please," she whispered, a plea that only ever seemed to inflame him. "Please, just go, he is sleeping." Marco laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "He can wake up. We are leaving, all of us." He grabbed her wrist, his fingers digging into her skin, and yanked her toward him. It was then that the world outside seemed to stop. The alleyway below, usually empty save for overflowing dumpsters and the occasional stray, was suddenly flooded with the intense, sterile glare of high-beam headlights. They were not the scattered beams of passing cars. They were focused, powerful, and numerous, shining directly up at her third-floor window like interrogation's lamps. Marco paused, momentarily blinded, his grip loosening on her wrist. "What the hell is that?" he muttered, squinting into the sudden brightness. Below, the sound of multiple engines cutting off in unison was followed by the heavy, metallic thunk of several car doors closing. There was no shouting, no sirens, just a low, organized thrum of activity. Then came the footsteps, heavy, measured, and fast, on the building's concrete stairs, ascending with a purpose that turned Emily's blood to ice. It was too fast for the police. It was something else. Marco, suddenly realizing he was trapped, shoved Emily backward. "Who did you call?" he snarled, his rage turning to panicked paranoia. Before Emily could even form a word, the apartment doorway was filled. Not by one man, but by 3, with more crowding the narrow hall behind them. The men who entered were immense, dressed in dark, functional suits, their faces impassive. They moved with a silent, synchronized efficiency that was profoundly unsettling. They did not pause to ask questions. They simply assessed the scene, Marco, wild-eyed and aggressive, Emily, cowering by the wall, the splintered doorframe. In less than a second, 2 of the men seized Marco, one taking each arm in a grip that made him cry out, his previous aggression dissolving instantly into a pathetic whimper. They did not hit him. They simply neutralized him, lifting him with brutal strength and maneuvering him back out into the hallway. A 4th man stepped through the doorway, and the entire atmosphere of the tiny apartment condensed. The other men were large, but he was a different entity entirely. Dante Morty was tall, his shoulders broad enough to fill the frame of the door he had just walked through. He was dressed in an immaculate black suit, the material so fine it seemed to drink the dim light of the room. A crisp white shirt was undone at the collar, and a silver watch glinted on his wrist. His dark hair was slicked back, emphasizing the sharp, aristocratic lines of his face. A faint, pale scar traced the line of his jaw, a stark contrast to his olive skin. He stopped just inside the room, his presence overwhelming the small space, his scent of expensive sandalwood and ozone cutting through the mildew. He slowly pulled a phone from his pocket, his steel-gray eyes glancing at the screen, then lifting to fix on Emily. His gaze was cold, analytical, and missed nothing. He looked at the active location ping on his screen, then at her terrified, tear-streaked face. "You texted the wrong number," Dante Morty stated, his voice a low, smooth baritone that held no hint of confusion, only absolute authority. Emily could not breathe, her entire body locked in a paralysis far deeper than Marco had ever induced. This man's stillness was more terrifying than any rage she had ever witnessed. The hallway behind him was silent. Marco was already gone, dispatched with an efficiency that suggested this was a mundane, everyday task. Dante Morty's steel-gray eyes swept the room, taking in the single, sagging mattress in the corner, the nearly empty pantry shelves visible through the doorway to the kitchenette, the threadbare blanket covering the sofa, and the splintered doorframe. His expression did not change. It remained one of cold, precise assessment, as if he were auditing a failing business rather than standing in the middle of a domestic crisis. He was a creature of polished marble and glass towers, and his presence in her crumbling, water-stained apartment felt like a tear in the fabric of reality. "Who was he?" Dante asked. His voice was not loud, but it resonated with a power that demanded an immediate answer. Emily had to swallow twice before she could find her own. My ex-boyfriend, Leo's father." Her voice was a reedy whisper, betraying the violent shaking in her limbs. Dante's gaze sharpened, moving from her to the sofa. He took a measured step into the room, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the worn linoleum. He knew someone was hiding. "Leo," Emily called out, her voice cracking. "It is okay, baby. Come out. The bad man is gone." A tiny, dark-haired head peeked out from behind the sofa, followed by a small body. Leo crept out, his eyes fixed on the immense stranger who dominated their home. Dante watched the boy, his expression unreadable. This was not what he had expected. When a live location ping had appeared on his private, encrypted line, a number known to perhaps 5 people in the world, he had assumed it was a trap, a brazen move from the Scarpas, or a new, foolish rival. He had brought his security detail expecting an ambush, ready to eradicate a threat. Instead, he found this: a desperate woman, a terrified child, and a squalid apartment that smelled of poverty and fear. He looked back at his phone at the message, "Help me, he's trying to break in." It was an accident, a cosmic, impossible accident. Someone had fumbled a number and dialed the devil. His gaze returned to Emily. She was pale, exhausted, with soulful hazel eyes that were currently wide with a terror he understood completely. She was afraid of him, and she was right to be. "Rocco," Dante said, speaking to the man standing sentinel at the door, a broad-shouldered man with a broken nose who served as his top lieutenant. "Take the name Marco from her. Find him. Make it clear that this address, this woman, and this child are off limits. Ensure he understands the consequences of forgetting." Rocco nodded once, a curt professional gesture. "And the door?" Rocco asked, glancing at the shattered frame. "Fix it, and send someone to the all-night market. The pantry is empty." Rocco nodded again and disappeared, his efficiency absolute. Dante was left alone with Emily and Leo, the silence in the room suddenly thick and heavy. He did not like messes, and this was a profound mess. Yet he found himself intrigued. He ruled his city through control, through the meticulous management of information and power. This was chaos, a random variable he had not anticipated. And now this woman had his private number. This made her a liability, but looking at her, at the raw vulnerability and the fierce, protective stance she took in front of her son, he felt something other than professional annoyance. It was a flicker of a different, older instinct, possession. She had called him. The universe, in its strange, violent humor, had delivered this problem to his doorstep. Therefore, it was his problem to solve. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket, his movements slow, not wanting to startle the child further. He withdrew a small, foil-wrapped square of dark chocolate, something his niece always demanded, and he knelt. It was a strange sight. the most feared man in the city, the head of the Morty crime family, crouching on one knee in a rundown apartment, his suit jacket pulling taut across his broad back. He held the chocolate out to Leo. "For you," he said, his voice softer, though still deep. Leo looked at his mother, who gave a tiny, jerky nod. The boy crept forward and snatched the chocolate, retreating immediately to the safety of his mother's legs. Dante rose to his full height, his attention returning to Emily. "You cannot stay here," he said. It was not a suggestion. I have nowhere else to go," Emily stammered, her hand resting on Leo's head. "He will come back, Marco, he always comes back." Dante's expression tightened. "He will not," he stated, the finality in his tone leaving no room for argument. "My men will be outside, 2 in the hall, 2 in the car below, no one will get to you, but this is a temporary solution." He looked around the apartment again, a flicker of distaste in his steel-gray eyes. "Tomorrow, Rocco will come for you. He will take you to a new apartment. It is clean, it is safe. The lease is paid for 1 year." Emily stared at him, her mind reeling. Why are you doing this? I do not understand. I cannot pay you." Dante Morty stepped closer, invading her personal space. She had to tilt her head back to look up at him, and she could smell the sandalwood and the cold night air clinging to him. He studied her face, his gaze tracing her tired eyes, her pale skin. "You are right," he said softly. "You cannot pay me, but you contacted me. That makes you my responsibility. I do not tolerate loose ends, Emily, and I do not tolerate men who hurt women and children. It is a personal distaste." He saw the confusion and fear warring in her eyes and made his decision. "You do not need to understand it. You only need to accept it. You and your son will be safe. That is all." He turned and walked to the door, pausing in the ruined frame. "Do not leave this apartment tonight. Do not call the police. They cannot protect you from him. I can." With that, he was gone, his footsteps silent as he descended the stairs, leaving Emily and Leo alone in the sudden, echoing silence. The faint scent of his cologne the only proof he had been there at all, and the 2 silent, imposing figures in her hallway the proof that her life had just been irrevocably and terrifyingly altered. The following days were a blur of disorientation for Emily. The 2 men outside her apartment door were statues, unmoving and silent, but their presence changed the very air she breathed. They did not speak to her, but when a delivery of groceries, more food than she had seen in a year, fresh fruit, milk, meat, and bread, arrived the next morning, one of them inspected every bag before allowing the delivery boy to leave them at her door. The promised carpenter arrived and replaced not just her door, but the entire frame, installing a heavy deadbolt that clicked with the sound of a bank vault. She and Leo remained inside, prisoners in their own home, yet safer than they had ever been. Marco did not return. His usual barrage of threatening texts and drunken calls ceased completely, his number falling silent as if he had never existed. The silence was louder and more terrifying than his rage had been. On the 3rd day, the man named Rocco returned. He knocked, a polite, firm sound that was starkly different from Marco's violence. When Emily opened the door, he stood there, his broken-nosed face impassive. "Mr. Morty has arranged for your new residence," he said, his voice gravelly. "It is time to leave. You will bring only what you need, essentials. The new apartment is furnished." Emily felt a wave of dizziness. This was happening too fast. "But, my job, I have a job at the diner." Rocco's gaze did not flicker. "Mr. Morty is aware. He has made other arrangements. Your former employer has been compensated for the inconvenience." Compensated. The word sounded so clinical, so final. She had been erased from her old life without her consent. She packed a single bag with clothes for herself and Leo, her son's favorite worn teddy bear, and the few photographs she had of her sister. The journey was silent. Rocco led them to a black sedan that was as immaculate and imposing as the SUVs from that first night. The drive took them out of the city's desperate edges, away from the cracked sidewalks and sirens, and into a neighborhood of clean, tree-lined streets and tall, modern glass buildings. The apartment building they entered had a doorman and polished marble floors. Rocco led them to an elevator that glided silently to the 12th floor. The apartment he unlocked was beautiful. It was not opulent, but it was spacious, clean, and filled with new, comfortable furniture. The kitchen was stocked. The bedrooms had fresh linens. A small box of new toys sat on the floor of the 2nd bedroom. From the window, she could see the entire city glittering below, a cold, beautiful expanse. "This is a cage," Emily whispered, turning to Rocco, who stood by the door. "It is a safe cage," he replied without emotion. "Mr. Morty values security, yours and his. Your presence here is secure. No one from your old life can find you." He handed her a new, slim smartphone. "This is your only contact. It has one number in it, Mr. Morty's. All your other contacts have been transferred. Your old phone is a liability." He placed a set of keys on the counter. "You are not a prisoner, Emily. There are guards downstairs, in the lobby, and in the garage. You are free to move around the neighborhood, but you will not draw attention. You will be quiet." That night, Dante Morty came himself. He did not knock. He used his own key, the sound of the deadbolt sliding back making Emily jump. He entered the apartment as he had the last, his presence instantly dominating the space. He had shed his suit jacket, and his white shirt was open at the throat, the sleeves rolled up to his forearms, revealing strong wrists and the edge of a dark tattoo. He looked less like the CEO and more like the Mafia boss tonight. He assessed the apartment, then her. "It is an improvement," he said. Emily, who had been sitting on the new sofa, stood up, her hands clenched at her sides. Thank you," she said, the words feeling inadequate and strange. "But I still do not understand why." Dante walked to the vast window, looking out at the city he owned. "I told you. You are a loose end, you have my number. You are a variable I did not account for, and I do not allow variables to remain unchecked. Keeping you safe means keeping you close. It means I control the variable." He turned to face her, his steel-gray eyes finding hers in the dim light. "Besides, I investigated. Marco, he has a history. You have a history. You are a good mother, a hard worker. You have no family to speak of, save a sister in another state. You are precisely the kind of person this city chews up and spits out." He paused, stepping away from the window, closer to her. "I am simply intervening in the process." "And what do you want from me?" Emily asked, her voice shaking despite her resolve. "I have no money. I have nothing to offer you." A slow, dangerous smile touched the corner of Dante's mouth, a smile that did not reach his eyes. "You are wrong. You have competence. I read your file. You were in university for accounting before you had to drop out. You are intelligent." He stopped directly in front of her. "I am offering you a job, not at a diner. You will work for me, in my primary office. You will handle the books for one of my legitimate holdings, a shipping and logistics company." Emily's blood ran cold. "Working for you, in your office, I cannot. I do not want to be involved in your world." Dante's gaze hardened. The brief hint of a smile vanished. "You are already involved in my world, Emily. You became involved the moment you pressed send on that text. Did you think you could summon me, use my resources, and then simply walk away? That is not how my world operates." He was not angry. He was stating a fact, as immutable as gravity. "You will work for me. You will be paid well. You will be able to provide for your son in a way you only dreamed of. In return, you will be loyal, you will be silent, and you will be mine." The word hung in the air between them, heavy and possessive. This was not a negotiation. It was a declaration of terms. "My world is dangerous," he continued, his voice dropping lower, "but being outside my protection is, for you, far more so. You have seen what happens to people who are weak. I am offering you strength. I am offering you and your son a life. Take it." He waited, his stillness a form of pressure she could not resist. She thought of Leo, sleeping safely in a clean room for the first time in his life. She thought of the splintering door. She looked at the man in front of her, a man who blended danger and safety into a terrifying, intoxicating whole. She gave a single, slow nod. "I accept." Emily's new life began with the precision of a military operation. She started her job at Morty Holdings, a gleaming glass tower in the heart of the financial district that served as the public face of Dante's sprawling empire. The office was the height of corporate elegance, all polished steel, dark wood, and hushed efficiency. She was given a private office, a powerful computer, and access to ledgers that were, to her surprise, meticulously kept. The shipping company she was assigned to was, as far as she could tell, entirely legitimate. She was good at the work. Her mind, sharp and starved for a challenge, devoured the complex spreadsheets and logistical puzzles. She organized, streamlined, and found efficiencies that saved the company thousands. She was intelligent, and she was competent, and for the first time in years, she felt a flicker of pride in herself, a sense of purpose that was not tied to pure survival. She saw Dante Morty almost every day. He was the CEO, the man in the corner office on the top floor. He would walk the floors, his presence silencing chatter, his sharp eyes missing nothing. He commanded boardrooms with the same cold authority he used in her rundown apartment. He was respected, feared, and devastatingly charismatic. He never singled her out at the office. He would pass her desk with a curt, professional nod, his gaze lingering for just a split second longer than it should. But she felt his observation constantly. She was aware that her position, her apartment, and her son's enrollment in a high-end private daycare were all maintained by the invisible, powerful hand of this one man. She was living in a gilded cage, and the man who held the key was both her jailer and her protector. The illusion of corporate normalcy was shattered one rainy Tuesday. Emily was leaving the office, heading to the garage to pick up the secure car, another provision from Dante, when a man stepped out of the shadows. He was not one of Dante's men. He was thin, with slick, greasy hair and a cheap suit. "Emily," he said, and her heart stopped. "You have been a hard woman to find, living well, it seems, a long way from Harlow Street." Emily backed away, her hand fumbling in her purse for the phone Dante had given her. "Who are you? What do you want?" The man smiled, revealing stained teeth. "Mr. Scarpa sends his regards. He is very interested in Mr. Morty's new acquisition. He wonders what kind of bookkeeping you are really doing. He thinks maybe you and I could have a conversation." Before she could scream, before she could even press the single button on her phone, Rocco was there. He moved from the garage stairwell like a shadow, his large hand clamping over the man's face, silencing him. Another of Dante's men appeared, grabbing the man's arms. It was over in 3 seconds. They bundled the man into a dark van that had pulled up silently, and then they were gone. Emily was left shaking, leaning against a concrete pillar, her heart pounding. Rocco reappeared at her side, his face as impassive as ever. "You are safe," he stated. "Go home, do not use the car, I will drive you." That night Dante came to her apartment. He did not use his key. He knocked hard, and when she opened it, he strode past her, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. "What did he say to you?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Emily recounted the conversation, her voice trembling. He said, "Mr. Scarpa sends his regards." Dante's jaw tightened, the scar tissue pulling white. "The Scarpas are animals. They see a soft target and they pounce. They think you are my weakness." He turned to her, his steel-gray eyes boring into hers. "This is the price of my protection, Emily. This is the world you are in now. Being near me is not safe. It makes you a target." "Then let me go," she whispered, tears of fear and frustration stinging her eyes. "Let me and Leo go. We will disappear. I will never tell anyone. I will never." He crossed the distance between them in a single, fast stride, his hands coming up to cup her face, his grip firm. "Do you truly believe that?" he hissed. "Do you think they would let you go, knowing you have been with me? Do you think I would?" His thumbs brushed across her cheekbones. "You are mine, Emily. You have been mine since you sent that text. I protect what is mine. I do not discard it." The proximity was suffocating. She could see the fine lines around his intense eyes, the sheer, unadulterated power rolling off him in waves. This was not the civilized CEO. This was the Mafia boss, the predator, and he had just been challenged. The danger, the raw possessiveness, it terrified her, but it also ignited something deep inside her, a dark, thrilling sense of safety she had never known. He was a monster, but he was her monster. "This is what my world is," he murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips. "It is blood, and it is loyalty, and it is permanent." He lowered his head, and she did not pull away. She did not know how. His lips claimed hers, and it was not a gentle kiss. It was deep, possessive, and inevitable, a brand of ownership that sealed her fate. It was the kiss of a king claiming his territory, and in that moment she surrendered to it completely. The kiss changed everything. The unspoken contract between them, once based on protection and obligation, was now sealed with an intimacy that was as dangerous as it was undeniable. Dante did not treat her as a fragile victim. He treated her as a partner, albeit one who was still learning the lethal rules of his world. He became a more frequent presence in her apartment, not just as a guardian, but as a man. He would arrive late, shed his suit jacket, and sit with her on the sofa, the silence comfortable as he unwound from the pressures of his dual life. He would watch her as she prepped Leo's meals for the next day, a strange, calculating softness in his eyes. He never spoke of the violence he enacted to keep them safe, but she saw it in the shadows under his eyes, in the coiled tension of his shoulders, and in the way his men treated him with an even deeper, more profound reverence. One evening, he brought her to his real home. Not the sterile corporate apartment in the city, but a sprawling, fortified penthouse that overlooked the entire metropolis, a fortress of glass and steel. "You and Leo will be safer here," he said, as if discussing a change in the weather. "The Scarpas are quiet, but quiet does not mean defeated. Here you are untouchable." The penthouse was magnificent, a testament to his power and wealth, yet it felt sterile, unoccupied. It was a showroom, not a home. But as she and Leo moved in, bringing her son's toys and her own few possessions, the space began to change. Dante watched this transformation, this injection of life into his stark environment, with a quiet intensity. The true test came a week later. Dante informed her they were attending a dinner. "My family," he said, and the words were heavy. She knew he did not mean his mother. He meant his capos, his lieutenants, the core of his organization. She dressed in a simple, elegant dark dress that Dante had provided, and when she emerged, he looked at her, his steel-gray eyes approving. "You look the part," he said, a rare compliment. He was taking her into the heart of his world, a public declaration. This was not just about protection. It was about presentation. He was showing his men that she was his. The dinner was at a private, high-end Italian restaurant that Dante owned. The men at the table were older, their faces etched with lifetimes of secrets and hard decisions. They were impeccably dressed, but their eyes were sharp, their deference to Dante absolute. They called him Capo. They looked at Emily with curiosity, their gazes assessing, measuring her. She was terrified, but she held her head high. She spoke when spoken to, her voice even, her hands steady as she sipped her wine. She was not the trembling woman from the rundown apartment. She was the woman who had the personal protection of Dante Morty, and she wore that invisible armor with a new, fragile confidence. Dante watched her, a ghost of a proud smile on his lips. She was strong. She was a survivor. She fit. The final threat, when it came, was not from the calculated malice of the Scarpas, but from the pathetic, desperate stupidity of her past. Marco, having somehow evaded or been released by Dante's men, perhaps with a warning Dante assumed would be sufficient, had been stewing in his own bitter rage. He had seen her. He had seen her exiting Dante's gleaming office tower, seen her step into a car that cost more than he would make in a decade. His bruised ego and jealous fury overrode his fear. He ambushed her in the private garage of the penthouse, grabbing her as she got out of the car, a knife pressed to her throat. "You think you are better than me?" he hissed, his breath hot and sour with alcohol. "You think your rich boyfriend can just throw me away?" Emily did not scream. Her body went cold, but her mind was sharp, honed by months of living on the precipice of Dante's world. "Marco, let me go," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "He will kill you. He will not even hesitate." Marco laughed. "He has to find me first." Just then the elevator doors dinged open. Dante stood there, his suit jacket off, his tie loosened. He had been coming down to meet her. He froze, his entire body going utterly, lethally still. His steel-gray eyes locked on Marco, and the temperature in the garage seemed to drop 20 degrees. "Let her go," Dante said, his voice a low, chilling command. Marco, panicked, only tightened his grip, pulling Emily back. "Or what? You will shoot me, you will shoot her." Dante did not move. He simply looked at Marco with an expression of profound, cold disappointment. "You," Dante said, "are a fool. You were warned. You were left alive as a courtesy. That courtesy has expired." In a movement so fast Emily barely registered it, Dante had a firearm in his hand. He did not aim at Marco. He aimed at the concrete floor just inches from Marco's foot. He fired. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, the concrete exploding where the bullet hit. Marco screamed, stumbling back in shock, his grip on Emily loosening for just 1 second. It was all Dante needed. He crossed the distance, slamming Marco against the wall, the gun pressed under his chin. Emily was free, gasping for air. Dante did not look at her. His entire focus was on the terrified man pinned against the concrete. "You put your hands on her," Dante whispered, the words vibrating with a fury that was all the more terrifying for its quiet control. "You threatened my son. You threatened my woman." He did not wait for an answer. He handled the threat permanently. It was brutal, efficient, and final. He turned Marco's existence into a closed ledger. When it was done, silence descended on the garage, broken only by Emily's ragged breathing. Dante turned to her, his chest heaving slightly, the gun still in his hand, lowered to his side. His face was hard, his eyes dark with the violence of the act. Emily looked at the man she had summoned with a text message. She looked at the man who had just taken a life to protect hers without flinching, without a flicker of remorse. She saw the Mafia boss, the killer. And she saw the man who had given her son a safe bed, the CEO who had respected her intelligence, the lover who had branded her as his. She did not run. She did not scream. She stepped forward, her legs shaking, and placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart. It was beating fast and hard. Dante looked down at her hand, then up at her face, his expression unreadable, waiting for her fear, for her recrimination. Instead, she rose on her toes and kissed him, a kiss that was not about passion, but about acceptance. A kiss that said she saw all of him, the darkness and the light, and she was not leaving. Months later, Emily stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of the penthouse, watching the rain lash against the glass. The city lights were a blurred watercolor below. Leo was asleep down the hall, in a room filled with toys, his breathing even and untroubled. The apartment was warm, filled with the scent of a dinner she had cooked. She heard him enter, the sound of his keys in the bowl by the door. Strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind, and she leaned back into the solid, familiar warmth of Dante Morti's chest. He rested his chin on her shoulder, his own gaze fixed on the stormy city he ruled. "You look beautiful," he murmured, his voice low. She was no longer the tired, faded woman in the cardigan. She wore a silk robe, her hair was soft, and her eyes, once shadowed by exhaustion, were clear and bright. "It was a night like this," Emily said quietly, "that I sent the text." Dante's arms tightened around her, his scarred jaw brushing her temple. "I remember." He turned her in his arms, his steel-gray eyes searching hers. The man who ruled an empire, who held the power of life and death, looked at her with a raw vulnerability that no one else in the world was ever allowed to see. "You texted the wrong number, Miyakara," he whispered, a faint smile touching his lips. Emily raised a hand to his face, her fingers gently tracing the faint scar on his jaw. "No," she replied, her voice soft but certain. "After everything, I am beginning to think I texted the right one." He lowered his head and kissed her, a deep, slow kiss that was not about possession, but about belonging. It was a kiss of a king and his queen, safe in their fortress, the storm raging harmlessly outside.